Hello, beautiful people. This is Venerable Thich Quang Tree on Dharma Tree, and you're listening to Dharma on Demand. So we are continuing our journey on the Eightfold Path, and today we'll be covering the seventh path, which is right mindfulness, or Samyak Smriti, or Samyak Sati. So right mindfulness is at the heart of the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha says that the Dharma, the ultimate truth of things, is directly visible, timeless, and calling out to be approached and seen. He says that it is always available to us, and that the place where it is to be realized is within oneself. And so the ultimate truth, the Dharma, is not something mysterious and remote, but the truth of our own experience. And so it can be reached only by understanding our experience, by penetrating it right through to its foundations. And this truth, in order for it to become liberating truth, has to be known directly. It's not enough merely to accept it on faith or to believe it on the authority of books or a teacher, or to think it out, through deductions. It has to be known through insight, grasped and absorbed by a kind of knowing which is also an immediate seeing. So what brings the field of experience into focus and makes it accessible to insight is a mental faculty called Sati in Pali, or Smriti in Sanskrit, which is usually translated as mindfulness or remembrance, or recollection. So mindfulness is remembering to come back to the present moment, to be present with our mind, to be attentive and aware. Yet, it's the kind of awareness involved in mindfulness differs from the kind of awareness that we have at work in our usual mode of consciousness, right? Because all consciousness involves awareness in the sense of a knowing or an experiencing of an object. But with the practice of mindfulness, awareness is applied at a special pitch. The mind is deliberately kept at the level of bare attention, a detached observation of what is happening within us and around us, and all in our present moment. So, in the practice of right mindfulness, the mind is trained to remain in the present, open, quiet, and alert, contemplating the present moment. All judgments, all interpretations have to be suspended. Or if they do occur, they just are acknowledged and they're dropped. So the task is simply to know whatever comes up just as it is occurring, riding the changes of events as if riding the waves in the ocean. And so the whole process is a way of coming back to the present moment, of standing in the here and the now without slipping away, without getting swept away by the tides of distracting thoughts. So it might be assumed that we are always aware of the present, but this is really just an illusion. It's a mirage, because only occasionally do we become aware of the present in the precise way required by the practice of mindfulness. So, in order for consciousness, or in ordinary consciousness, the mind begins a cognitive process with some impression given in the present, right? But it doesn't stay with it. Instead, it uses the immediate impression as a springboard for building blocks of mental constructs which remove it from the truth of the object. So the cognitive process is generally interpretive. The mind perceives its object free from contemplation only briefly. Free from conceptualization only briefly. Then, immediately after grasping the initial impression, it launches into a course of ideas by which it seeks to interpret the object to itself to make it understandable in terms of its own categories and assumptions. So, in the end, the original direct experience has been overrun by ideation, and by the presented object appears only dimly through the dense layers of ideas and views. And the Buddha calls this process, or this process of mental construction, papancha, elaboration or embellishment. And the elaborations block out the presentational immediacy of phenomena. They let us know the object only at a distance and not as it really is. But the elaborations don't just screen cognition, they also serve as a basis for projections. So the deluded mind, cloaked in ignorance, projects its own internal constructs outwardly, ascribing them to the object as if they really belong to it. And as a result, what we know as the final object of cognition, what we use as the basis for our values, our plans, and actions, is a patchwork product, not the original article. And it takes what is given in immediate experience as its groundwork and raw material, but along with it, it includes something else, the embellishments fabricated by the mind. So to correct the erroneous notions in is the task of wisdom. But for wisdom to discharge its work effectively, it needs access to the object as it is in itself, uncluttered by the conceptual elaborations. So the task of right mindfulness is to clear up the cognitive field. Mindfulness brings to light the experience in its pure immediacy. It reveals the object as it is before it has been plastered over with conceptual paint, overlaid with interpretations. So, to practice mindfulness is thus a matter not so much of doing, but of undoing, not thinking, not judging, not associating, not planning, not imagining, not wishing. All these doings of ours are modes of interference, ways the mind manipulates experience and tries to establish its dominance. Mindfulness undoes the knots and tangles of these doings by simply noting. It does nothing but note, watching each occasion of experience as it arises, stands, and passes away. And in the watching, there is no room for clinging, no compulsion to saddle things with our desires. There is only a sustained contemplation of experience in its bare immediacy, carefully and precisely and persistently. So, mindfulness exercises a powerful grounding function. It anchors the mind securely in the present so it does not float away into the past and the future with their memories, regrets, fears, and hopes. Mindfulness facilitates the achievement of both serenity and insight. It can lead to either deep concentration or wisdom, depending on the mode in which it's applied. It can be applied toward the deeper levels of inner calm, culminating in the stages of absorption called the jhanas, or whether instead it strips away the veils of delusion to arrive at penetrating insight. To lead to the stages of serenity, the primary chore of mindfulness is to keep the mind on the object of meditation, free from straying or straying away. Mindfulness serves as the guard charged with the responsibility of making sure that the mind does not slip away from the object to lose itself in random, undirected thoughts. So, to lead to insight and the realization of wisdom, its task in this phase of the practice is to observe, to note, to discern phenomena with utmost precision until their fundamental characteristics are brought to light. So, right mindfulness is cultivated through a practice called the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, the Satipatthana, the mindfulness contemplation of four objects: the body, feelings, mind, and object of mind. And so, the first characteristic, the first foundation of mindfulness, contemplation of the body, the Buddha begins his exposition of the body with contemplation of the mindfulness of breathing, anapanasati. Mindfulness of breathing usually serves as the root meditation subject, the foundation for the entire course of contemplation. By itself, mindfulness of breathing can lead to all the stages of the path, culminating to full awakening. So, mindfulness of breathing can function so effectively as a subject of meditation because it works with a process that is always available to us, the process of breathing. So, what it does to turn this process into a basis for meditation is simply to bring it into the range of awareness by making the breath an object of observation, the object of your meditation. One needs only to breathe naturally, keeping the breath in mind at the contact point around the nostrils or upper lip, where the sensation of breath can be felt as the air moves in and out, or by observing the breath at the chest or abdomen as it rises or falls, or by simply counting the breath. The Buddha's exposition of mindfulness of breathing involves 4 basic steps. The first four of the 16 practices of the Anapanasati Sutra. So the first 2 require that a long inhalation or exhalation be noted as it occurs, and that a short inhalation or exhalation be noted as it occurs. So one simply observes the breath moving in and out, observing it as closely as possible, noting whether the breath is long or short. So as mindfulness grows sharper, the breath can be followed through the entire course of its movement, from beginning of inhalation through its intermediary stages to its end, then from the beginning of an exhalation through its intermediary stages to its end. The third step is called clearly perceiving the entire body, and the fourth step, calming the body. And this involves a progressive quieting down of the breath and its associated bodily functions until they become extremely fine and subtle. And beyond these 4 basics, steps lie more advanced practices which direct mindfulness of breathing toward deep concentration and insight. And so I'll recite the first 4 of these practices that are in the Anapanasati Sutra. And the Buddha says, breathing in a long breath, I know I am breathing in a long breath. Breathing out a long breath, I know I am breathing out a long breath. Breathing in a short breath, I know I am breathing in a short breath. Breathing out a short breath, I know I am breathing out a short breath. Breathing in, I am aware of my whole body. Breathing out, I am aware of my whole body. Breathing in, I calm my whole body. Breathing out, I calm my whole body. And so with this, we also want to know all of our body's postures and movements as well. So when we sit, we know we are sitting. When we stand, walk, or lie down, we know that we're standing, walking, or lying down. When changing postures, we know that we are changing postures. When we practice this way, mindfulness is always there. Another exercise on mindfulness of the body presents analytical contemplations intend to expose the body's real nature. This is the meditation on the body's unattractiveness, or the reflections or repulsiveness on the 32 parts of the body. This meditation on attractiveness is designed to counter infatuation with the body, especially in its form of sexual desire. And the Buddha teaches that the sexual drive is a manifestation of craving, thus a cause of suffering that has to be reduced and released as a precondition for bringing suffering to an end. The meditation aims at weakening sexual desire by depriving the sexual urge of its cognitive perception of the body as sensually alluring. Sensual desire rises and falls together with its perception. It springs up because we view the body as attractive. It declines when this perception of beauty is removed. The perception of bodily attractiveness, in turn, lasts only so long as the body is looked at superficially, grasped in terms of selected impressions. So to counter that perception, we have to refuse to stop with these impressions, but proceed to inspect the body at a deeper level with a kind of probing scrutiny that's grounded in dispassion. So using visualization as an aid, we can mentally dissect the body into its components and investigate them one by one, bringing their repulsive nature to light. But the aim of this meditation must not be misapprehended, right? Because the aim isn't to produce a aversion and disgust and to hate the body, but to detach and to extinguish the fire of lust by removing its fuel. Another exercise in mindfulness of the body is cemetery meditation, or meditation on death, or contemplation of death, and the contemplation of the body's disintegration after death. One obtains a clear mental image of a decomposing body, then applies the process to one's own body, and considering this body, now so full of life, has the same nature and is subject to the same fate. It cannot escape death, cannot escape disintegration, but must eventually die and decompose. So this is kind of the mantra that we would recite to ourselves when we do this type of meditation. And again, the purpose of this meditation shouldn't be misunderstood. The aim isn't to indulge in a morbid fascination with death and corpses, but to sever our egotistic clinging to existence with a contemplation that is sufficiently powerful to break its hold. So the clinging to existence subsists through the implicit assumption of permanence. In the sight of a corpse, we meet the teacher who proclaims unambiguously everything formed is impermanent. The second foundation is the contemplation of feeling. In the Abhidharma, the Buddhist psychology, it lists 51 kinds of mental formations, and feelings is one of them. In us, there is an ocean of feelings in which every single drop of water is a different feeling. To observe our feelings, we just need to sit on the shore of our ocean and identify each feeling as it flows by and disappears. Feelings are either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So when we have a pleasant feeling, we may have a tendency to cling to it. And when we have an unpleasant feeling, we may be inclined to chase it away. So from this, it can be seen that each of the root defilements is conditioned by a particular kind of feeling. Greed by pleasant feelings, aversion by painful feelings, and delusion by neutral feelings. Pleasure doesn't always have to lead to greed, pain to aversion, neutral feelings to delusion, though. The tie between them can be snapped with mindfulness. Feeling will stir up a defilement only when it is not noticed, when it is indulged rather than observed. So, by turning it into an object of observation, mindfulness diffuses the feeling so that it cannot provoke an unwholesome response. Then, instead of relating to the feeling by way of habit through attachment, repulsion, or apathy, we relate by way of contemplation, using the feeling as a springboard for understanding the nature of experience. And as we contemplate and feelings arise, we note their distinctive qualities, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. The feeling is noted without identifying with it, taking it to be without taking it to be I or mine or something happening to me. Awareness is kept at a bare attention, and one watches each feeling that arises, seeing it as merely a feeling, a bare mental event, stripped of all subjective references, all pointers to an ego. So the task is simply to note the feeling's quality, its tone of pleasure, pain, or neutrality. And emotions become strong when we don't know how to look after them. When our feelings are stronger than our mindfulness, we suffer. And the third foundation of mindfulness is the contemplation of mind. To be aware of the mind is to be aware of the mental formations. Chitta samskara. Formation, samskara, is a technical term in Buddhism. Anything that is formed, anything that is made of something else is a formation. A flower is a formation. Anger is a mental formation. Some mental formations are present all the time and are called universal, right? Like contact, attention, feeling, perception, and volition. Some rise only under particular circumstances like zeal or determination, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Some are uplifting and help us transform our suffering, like wholesome or beneficial mental formations. And others are heavy and imprison us in our suffering, like unwholesome or unbeneficial mental formations. There are mental formations that are sometimes wholesome and sometimes unwholesome. When our thinking helps us see clearly, it is beneficial. But if our mind is scattered in all directions, that thinking is unbeneficial. There are so many beautiful aspects of our consciousness, like faith, humility, self-respect, non-craving, non-anger, non-ignorance, diligence, ease, care, equanimity, and non-violence. Unwholesome mental formations, on the other hand, are like a tangled ball of string. When we try to untangle it, we only wind it around ourselves until we can't move. So these mental formations are sometimes called afflictions, kleshas, because they bring pain to ourselves and others. And sometimes they are called leaks or setbacks because they are like a cracked vase. And the basic unwholesome mental formations are greed, hatred, ignorance, pride, doubt, and views. The secondary unwholesome mental formations arising from the basic ones are anger, malice, hypocrisy, malevolence, jealousy, selfishness, deception, guile, unwholesome excitement, the wish to harm, immodesty, arrogance, dullness, agitation, lack of faith, indolence, carelessness, forgetfulness, distraction, and lack of attention. So, according to the Vijnavada school of Buddhism, the mind only or consciousness only school or tradition, altogether there are 51 kinds of mental formations, including feelings. So every time a mental formation arises, we can practice mere recognition. When we are agitated, we just say, I am agitated, and mindfulness is already there. Until we recognize agitation as agitation, it will push us around and we will not know what's going on or why. So, to practice mindfulness of the mind does not mean not to be agitated. It means that when we are agitated, we know that we are agitated. Mindfulness is a good friend to our agitation. Even before agitation manifests in our mind consciousness, it's already in our store consciousness in the form of a seed, because all mental formations lie in our store consciousness in the form of seeds. Something someone does or says may water the seed of agitation, and then agitation manifests in our mind consciousness. Every mental formation that manifests needs to be recognized. If it is wholesome, mindfulness will cultivate it. If it is unwholesome, mindfulness will encourage it to return to our stored consciousness and remain there dormant. We may think that our agitation is ours alone, but if we look deeply and carefully, we'll see that it is our inheritance from our whole society and many generations of our ancestors and past lives. Individual consciousness is made of the collective consciousness, and the collective consciousness is made of individual consciousnesses. They can't be separated. So, our ideas of beauty, goodness, and happiness, for example, are also the ideas of our society. Every year, a new iPhone or high tech gadget gets released, and we look at these through the lens of our collective consciousness. When we buy that new iPhone, it's because we see it with the eyes of the collective consciousness. Someone who lives deep in the Amazon forest would never spend that kind of money on an iPhone, or probably not even know what to do with it or what it even is. So we usually describe mind consciousness and store consciousness as two different things, but store consciousness is just mind consciousness at a deeper level. And if we look deeply and carefully at our mental formations, we can see the roots in our store consciousness. And mindfulness helps us look deeply into the depths of our consciousness. Every time one of the 51 mental formations arise, we acknowledge its presence, look deeply into it, and see its nature of impermanence and interbeing. When we practice this, we are liberated from fear, sorrow, and the fires burning inside us. When mindfulness embraces our joy, our sadness, and all our other mental formations, sooner or later we will see their deep roots as well. The fourth and last foundation of mindfulness is the contemplation of the objects of our mind, or the phenomena or dharmas. Phenomena means objects of our mind. Each of our mental formations has to have an object. If you're angry, you have to be angry at someone or something, and that person or thing can be called the object of your mind. When you remember someone or something, that is the object of your mind. There are 51 kinds of mental formations, so there are 51 kinds of objects of mind. The fourth foundation is where we pay attention to what is arising. In the sutra, the Buddha puts the fourth foundation in 5 groups. The first is the 5 hindrances, which are sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness, and worry and doubt. The second are the 5 aggregates, the skandhas, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. The third are the 6 inner and 6 outer senses: eye and form, ear and sound, nose and smell, tongue and taste, body and touch, mind and mental objects. The fourth are the 7 factors of enlightenment, which are mindfulness, investigation, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. And the fifth are the Four Noble Truths: suffering, the cause of suffering, cessation of suffering, and the Eightfold Path. The 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of enlightenment require special attention because they are the principal impediments and aids to liberation. So, whenever one of the hindrances arises, its presence should be noted. Then, when it fades away, a note should be made of its disappearance as well. It's also important to contemplate and understand how the hindrances arise, how they can be removed, and how they can be prevented from arising in the future. A similar mode of contemplation is to be applied to the 7 factors of enlightenment. When any one of these factors arises, its presence should be noted. Then, after noting its presence, one has to investigate to discover how it arises and how it can be matured. When they first spring up, though, the enlightenment factors are pretty weak, but with consistent cultivation, they start to accumulate strength over time. So mindfulness initiates the contemplative process. When it becomes well established, it arouses investigation, the probing quality of intelligence. So investigation in turn calls forth energy. Energy gives rise to rapture. Rapture leads to tranquility. Tranquility to one pointedness concentration, and concentration to equanimity. And from those steps, hopefully, we will all achieve Anuttara Samyak Smriti. And that is that for this podcast. Thank you for listening. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.